Hey there everybody, Mazarok here, and today I've got the first in what's probably going to be another series that I'm starting. Yeah, I've been on content overload and I could not be happier, so let's go, right? This is Pugging Tips. Now this just isn't for tanks, although this is for everyone, right? So I know I tend to specialize in tank content, but if you are a pug in Mythic Plus, actually that's going to be good to add to the WoW lingo. I have some tips for you here because recently I have made some changes to how I play the game, how I approach the game, and I have found myself full-fledged in the pugging world once again. I still do run with a lot of my friends, but at the same time, they would like to raid a lot more than I do, and I just end up pugging a lot of keys. So I definitely, some of y'all are going to give me an aneurysm, because holy crap, man. There's some things here that we need to talk about, some good tips, but especially if you're entering the Mythic Plus world, if you're more of a casual player, there's some things that you can do to improve that don't require you to have a whole lot, just kind of a different mindset and a different perception and things to be aware of. Before we do get into it though, please do like, comment, subscribe. There's a Patreon link down below if you wish to support me directly. There's early access content, there's exclusive content, there's easy to grab content, and all my weak auras, profiles, and everything like that are all in one easy to grab document, but you can get all of those for free in my Discord. You just got to search a little bit because there are kind of, you know, you got to do a little bit of grunt work, unfortunately, because those channels are very, very popular no matter how much I try and keep them clean. There's also a Twitch link if you wish to watch me stream. And, yeah, let's go. All right, so tip number one, if you are going to be living in the pugging world, one of the things that you need to develop is situational awareness. Okay? This is, be aware of what is around you. Be aware of patrols. Don't just funnel into the pack and be like, my job is DPS. All I do is DPS and all I do is funnel. Don't just heal and just be like, oh man, like, no, all I need to do is heal and just not pay attention to anything else around me. And tanks, if you're pulling a pack somewhere, be aware that there might be a patrol coming in on where you're going with that. Sometimes you have to take pulls and pull them back to avoid making larger pulls. This applies to all three roles very equally, but having the situational awareness of what is going on and around, and this doesn't have to include dungeon knowledge or anything else. Just know, like, hey, take your camera, put it max distance, look around, see what's patrolling, see what's happening, because there's so and the swirlies. Oh my god, the swirlies. So many times have I seen people just die standing in a swirly because they're too busy looking at their action bars and just die, because there's a lot of things, especially once you start getting into plus 15s and up, that will just literally one-shot you if you just sit in it. Whether it's tyrannical or fortified weak, there's always going to be a swirly in almost every dungeon that is going to instantly global you. And having the situational awareness to look at your feet, to look at your character, to look around is very, very important. Get your eyes off your action bars and see the bigger picture all around. Proper situational awareness is one of those things that can, that makes, not having situational awareness like that is what can kill key groups and is a big factor in killing a dungeon run. Now, another factor that is very, very good for killing dungeon runs, let's say, so it's not a good thing at all, is use your interrupts. Every good run that I have and every terrible run that I have has one distinctive factor: total amount of interrupts. I was in a Naka defensive the other day, and there were 2 DPS who grand totaled 2 interrupts. 1 each. Did we time that key? No, we didn't. Because so many things got off that were just hurting everyone. The healer was struggling to keep up. They were burning mana faster. And it just goes crazy how much this escalates when things don't get interrupted. Now, if your argument is, well, I don't know what to interrupt. Interrupting anything is better than interrupting nothing. A good pug tank will, in fact, have all of the decent big CCs and interrupts that are required. I hold my kick for all of the little things I know I need to hold my kick or my stuns for. Like, if I go into Temple of the Jade Serpent, I'm focusing on Tidal Burst. That's literally what my thing is. And anybody who's run Temple knows exactly what that is, but not everyone can hold their kick for Tidal Burst. There has to be some give and take, and if you don't know what to kick, kicking anything is better than kicking nothing in all scenarios. As a pug tank, I would much rather you see you have 30 kicks and they're all the wrong thing, but they were kicked. Or, not the wrong thing, the less right thing, I guess would be the best terminology for this. I would much rather see you have 30 on the board that are just maybe Storm Bolts instead of Tempest in not good defensive, and then you kicking only 3 times and them all being the exact perfect thing. There's so many ways to get around kicks and CC and things like that. But not doing it at all is literally, like, when I look at a failed run, I go to the interrupts, and every single time, it's like, me at 30, 40, 50, and 2 people at, like, 3. And you're just like, okay, that's why. Trust me when I say, when people use their interrupts, dungeon runs go so much more smoothly. Tip number 3. We have a new problem in Dragonflight, and that is diminishing returns on stuns. Now, this came accompanied with a new good problem that I'm seeing within the community, is that before in Shadowlands, every pug tank pretty much was begging everyone to use their crowd controls and their stuns and everything, and now the community has adapted, but now almost use them too much and too quickly. While you absolutely want to be using your CC and your stuns, do make sure that you're using them to actually stop something. What I see a lot of in pugs is people just blowing their stun load right at the very beginning of a pull, and mobs are affected by something called diminishing returns. After so many stuns, they become immune. And with 5 people in a party, it is so incredibly easy for mobs to become immune to any sort of crowd control effects. And this means that certain things that you absolutely need to stop become unstoppable due to these diminishing return effects. So if you are in a pug and you know you have your stun, you're going to be using this, make sure you're at least stunning something. Don't just blow it at the beginning of a pack just to say, hey, I stunned something, I'm using my crowd control. The WoW community and the WoW pugs need to get smarter about when to use those stuns. Now, unlike kicks, where as long as they're casting something that you can interrupt, 0 problems, you can always go, this can really affect unkickable casts that hurt a lot. And me as a, so when I am pugging, I have, like I said with my kicks, I have everything kind of planned for pulls, as a good, pug tank should. I'm going to try and stun Rally the Clan. I am going to try and stun, Hunter's Prey. All of those things, unless they knock it offensive, where I am trying to help out. But the thing is you want to make sure that you're at least stopping those casts. I will use my AoE stun in Shockwave, or, Chaos Nova, Incap Roar. There's, everybody kind of has something, right? To try and stop multiple, but if I only see the one, I'll opt for Stormbolt, a single target stun, or Shield Charge. So then that way I can really kind of maximize that before the diminishing returns come into play. Because especially once you start getting into higher keys, whatever your thing is, if it's getting Keystone Master, if it's getting Keystone Hero, this absolutely does come into play and can wipe a party if you guys are not careful. So be aware of diminishing returns on stuns, and you know what? It's okay to hold them for maybe the end of a pull. Sometimes some tanks just don't have the defensives at the end of a pull. On bolstering week, raging week as well. If you're in a raging week without a soothe in your party, man, please save those stuns for the end. Or, you know, try and save something for it towards the end of a pack, because when a tank is running out of gas and they don't have their defensives towards the end of a pull, or maybe they know they absolutely need it for the end, kiting might be the only way they can do, or backstepping and adding that layer of crowd control on top of just makes things so much easier. So be aware of diminishing returns on stuns. Lastly, for today, because this is part 1, is dungeon knowledge. Now, in Shadowlands, one thing that I notice as a pug tank is, as long as I could power through. I could take a group that didn't exactly know what to do and power through a 15. I could power through a 17, 18. I could even sometimes do it in a 20, depending on the dungeon, because I knew what kicks I needed, I knew what stuns I needed, and I could layer all of that properly and power things through. I could quite literally move the mobs to where they were completely safe, the packs and everything like that, and really just kind of force shove that through. But now, Dragonflight dungeons are different. They are a lot more complicated than they were in Shadowlands, and like I discussed with the interrupts and the stuns, dungeon knowledge is very required for DPS pugs, for healer pugs to kind of go through. Now, it always was required for a smooth run. I'm not trying to say it wasn't, but you could, before, kind of take a couple of people that all they did was blast and kind of power through. That is incredibly more difficult in dungeons like Ruby Life Pools, with the amount of things that kind of need to be done and the mechanics that need to be obeyed and the baiting that needs to happen that the tank literally has no control over. So this is something that when you're in that 5 to 10 range as a DPS player, look at the dungeons, okay? Things may not kill you, but if they hurt, if a mechanic goes off and it hurt you, it brought you from 10 to 60, take note of that mechanic and be like, when I get into a 15 from this 5, that's going to just global me. Global means straight up just kill. I'm going to add that to the lingo list. That's just going to global me. And when you start learning these mechanics, you start learning what to kick a little bit better, what to stun a little bit better, where to stand a little bit better. They'd be like, okay, well, every time I stand here, I get this mechanic, and then this patrol is a little bit too close, and I have to disengage, or I have to run away, and I run into a patrol. So maybe I should stand on the opposite side where there's no patrols. Being aware of things like where patrols are, especially with how tightly grouped some of these dungeons are. I'm talking Ruby Life Pools. Not good offensive can be very, very bad for this in the Tira and Maruk area. It can be very, very easy to end up in a double or triple pull because people aren't aware of the dungeon knowledge of patrols or where to bait or where to move. And so many times I have seen people just kind of run off to avoid a mechanic, but they run right into another pack. They had a 270-degree radius where they could just move back, but they move right into that 90-degree portion of the circle that's right into a pack, which ends up into another circle, another double, which can also mean that cooldowns get off-timed, because sometimes as a tank, I'll do like a big pull and then I'll do a small pull, knowing there's a bigger pull up ahead that I need certain CDs to be had. I need a healer to have their have some sort of healer CD to get us through it. I need to have my defensives properly. I need to have, you know, I need things to go smoothly, so that's why I will, you know, pull a small, just kind of get it out of the way, let time kind of, you know, do its thing, let cooldowns come back, and then pull, and then people pull stuff into it accidentally, sometimes purposely, which why let the tank run their route. Trust me, it's no tank wants to see DPS with low DPS, okay? No one. There's not a tank out there that wants to be like, man, I'm really happy that that Demon Hunter only pulled 20k overall. Not true. Every tank out there literally wants to see every DPS blasting, and some of these routes are actually designed a little bit more optimally for DPS cooldowns. Now, that depends on what DPS you have and the timings and things like that, so this is kind of a fluctuating thing, right? But at the same time, we want to make sure that things go incredibly smoothly. We have a smooth route. Everything kind of works, and CDs are up for the big pulls where they need. So a lot of these routes that, you know, kind of tend to fall into the norm, the routine of this is what it is because this is what's best for the average amount of DPS specs to just blast. Because while players will fall into a norm of this, for some reason, whenever I run this route, things go incredibly smoothly, and sometimes we don't realize it, but that's because a lot of the big pulls line up perfectly with DPS cooldowns, right? Sometimes that just happens, and we fall into let's get done what we need to get done and get it done properly. But dungeon knowledge is huge, so take the time when you're in that 5 to 10 range and take note of mechanics that really, you know, that hurt a little bit, because those mechanics that hurt a little bit are going to hurt a lot when you get into those higher keys, and they want to be avoided, they want to be stunned, they want to be CC'd, they want to be kicked, whatever have you not. But if you as the DPS take the time to learn that, you take immense pressure off the tank to be able to work through this and kind of work things out. Because a lot of the times when I have so I was in a 20 Azure Vaults the other day. We timed it. It was like, okay, it was kind of a boring run, but at the same time, it was so incredibly clean. Everybody was doing the mechanics properly. We were rotating CCs and cooldowns, and that's because everyone in that dungeon knew what had to get stunned, knew what had to get CC'd, but also knew to wait, right, and a little bit, and kind of just see what comes up, all right? And it's okay to not kick a cast or stop a cast right at the beginning. It doesn't need to be kicked within the first 0.5 seconds. Sometimes there's a cast time of 1 to 2 seconds here, and letting that cast get almost to full before stopping it can buy a lot of time, because all of those seconds add up where there's just nothing going on. Because the longer, like when they're casting a mechanic, they're not doing anything else. And that's that weird sort of dungeon knowledge that you can work through and find out. But it's very, very important that the entire party has that knowledge of dungeons. And if we go in with the perception and the mentality of learning and be like, okay, this hurts me in a 5, this is going to hurt in a 15, this needs to be stopped. Oh, hey, I saw my tank get cranked from 100 to 20, and it's not a Death Knight. And what happened there? What was that ability? When you start asking these sorts of questions when you're doing dungeons, you're going to find yourself being incredibly more useful in a party. I was running a knockout offensive, and we had a druid before the rework where they could easily take Solar Beam. So they took Solar Beam, and they were like, I'm on explosives. I have 100% of them. This is my run. You guys just blast. That Boomy's DPS was a little bit lower than the other two, but literally the other 4 people did not have to worry about explosives at all. The healer DPS was one of the higher ones that I had seen by the end of the run, because the healer didn't have to worry about every single explosive. And the dude uses Solar Beam on like perfect cast and all of these things. And while that person's overall might not have been the highest, we timed that with like 12 minutes left. It was so friggin' clean because all of the mechanics were being obeyed and done, and just everything worked out so incredibly well. And these are things that you can do. I find a lot of people fall into the mentality of, well, we didn't time this run because their overall wasn't great. Most of the times it's because nothing was kicked and a lot of mechanics went off they shouldn't have. So that is part 1 for dungeon tips, Mythic Plus tips for Dragonflight. Do you have any as well? I would love to hear what you guys have to say. And I am going to be doing part 2. This is going to be an ongoing series. So yeah, let me know in the comment section down below. Lastly, my patrons, thank you so much for making videos like this happen. Aside from that, I hope you guys are having a good one, and happy tanking.